Hello, horror lovers. Welcome to the chilling world of Mr. Haunt. Please subscribe. It's our biggest motivation to keep bringing you spine-tingling stories. Let us know in the comments which city you're listening from. If you enjoy this video, don't forget to hit the like button. Now, let's get into the stories. I wasn't the kind of person who believed in monsters. I'd done over 40 long-distance solo hikes across the US, and I'd always said, if anything was out there, I would have seen it by now. I trusted tracks, weather, maps, and instinct, never stories. Never the internet rumors. That changed on my 42nd hike. It was northern Michigan, just below the Upper Peninsula, about 6 miles from the Manistee National Forest. A friend of mine, Caleb, had disappeared in those woods 2 years earlier, vanished without a trace on a day hike. His GPS tracker turned off mid-trail, and nothing was ever found. No gear, no prints, nothing. That bugged me for a long time, so when I had a week off, I decided to hike the same area. Not to find him or prove anything, just to retrace his steps and maybe feel like I was closing some invisible door. I had no idea what I was walking into. Day 1 was normal. Thick trees, early autumn breeze, a little fog hugging the earth. I followed the same trail Caleb had taken, marked by his old AllTrails upload. His final coordinates ended near a clearing surrounded by birch and cedar. I camped a half-mile from that spot. At 3:17 a.m., something walked through my camp. I didn't hear it approach, just the sudden sound of twigs breaking, slow, deliberate, like something pacing. Not a deer, not a bear. I stayed silent in my tent, didn't unzip it. My breath hitched when I saw the shadow. It wasn't four-legged, it walked upright, and it was huge dot, broad shoulders, long arms, pointed ears, like a Doberman's silhouette on steroids. It sniffed the air loudly, moving toward my tent with this low, guttural growl that vibrated through my chest. I didn't move. I didn't even blink. Then, just as suddenly, it was gone. No sound of retreat. Just nothing. In the morning, I found massive prints circling my tent. 5-toed, but wrong, like a cross between a canine pad and a man's foot. Deep claws. The prints were over 14 inches long. I packed up and left, fast, but the forest didn't let me go. By midday, I was completely off course. The trail markers vanished. My GPS froze. I hiked for 6 hours and found myself in the same clearing 3 separate times. It was like something wanted me to stay. At dusk, I heard it again. This time it didn't pace. It charged. I barely had time to climb a boulder before it burst into view. 9 feet tall, black fur matted with mud, long jaws with yellowed teeth, and intelligent, furious eyes. It stood at the base of the rock, clawing at the stone, huffing and snarling, pacing in frustration. I swear it looked me dead in the eye and smiled. Then it turned and left, like it was bored, or saving me for later. I stayed on that rock until dawn. When I climbed down, my backpack was gone, but there, in its place, was Caleb's knife, the same blade he always carried on hikes, with his initials scratched into the handle. It hadn't been found in 2 years, not by search teams, not by his family, but there it was, clean, sharp, sitting neatly on a smooth stone. Like a gift. I hiked out without water, without gear, without a map. I walked for 30 miles, barefoot, hallucinating. By the end, when I made it back to town, people thought I was just another cracked hiker. But the park ranger looked pale when I mentioned the prints. He didn't laugh. He just said, "Some places, people go missing for a reason. You were lucky. It doesn't usually let folks walk out." I never went back. But sometimes I hear growling, in my sleep. And sometimes, just for a moment, I swear I can smell pine and wet fur in the middle of my apartment, like something found me and decided to wait. It was supposed to be just a weekend away. That's how my brother sold it to me. Come up to the cabin, he said. No cell service, no traffic, just the woods and peace and quiet. I needed it. I'd just been through a rough breakup and work was bleeding into every hour of my life. So I packed a bag, left my phone in the glove box, and headed north. His cabin sat near the Wisconsin-Minnesota border, tucked back on a dead-end dirt road near Chequamegon Forest. He'd renovated the place himself. Solar panels, a well, propane for heat. Nothing fancy, just isolation. The first night was perfect. We grilled burgers, drank beers, and caught up. The second night was different. Right after dinner, he grew quiet. He kept glancing toward the tree line, like he was listening for something. When I asked, he just shook his head and said, "You'll hear it if it comes." I thought he was messing with me. But later, after we both turned in, I couldn't sleep. There was this pressure in the air, like the kind before a thunderstorm, except there wasn't a cloud in the sky. Then, sometime past 1 a.m., I heard something move outside. Not a branch snapping, not a squirrel or raccoon. Footsteps heavy, padded, then a low, rumbling sound, somewhere between a growl and a breath. Deep enough that I felt it in my chest more than I heard it. I slipped out of bed and crept to the window. Something was standing at the edge of the woods, maybe 30 feet away. Its eyes glinted in the moonlight, reflective, animalistic, but wrong. They were too high off the ground. Then, it moved fast. It sprinted out of the trees in 2 strides, dropping to all 4s, before rising again, tall and lean, with long, reverse, bent legs, and a narrow snout full of teeth. I didn't scream. I couldn't. The thing circled the cabin once, sniffing, scratching, tapping its claws against the siding like it was checking the walls for weak spots. Then it was gone. I backed away from the window and turned to wake my brother, but he was already standing there, shotgun in hand. "You saw it," he said quietly. He wasn't surprised, not even shaken. "How long?" I asked. "First time I saw it was last year. It only shows up when someone new's here, follows them for days, then it just waits." "For what?" He didn't answer. The next day, we packed up, left early. He didn't ask me to stay longer. A week later, I got a text from his wife. He never made it back. His truck was still at the trailhead. No tracks, no blood, nothing but an empty cabin and a trail of claw marks scratched deep into the front door. I never saw it again, but I still wonder, was I the bait? I used to work the night shift at a relay station near the edge of a wildlife reserve in northern Michigan. Not glamorous, just checking signal strength and monitoring emergency communications. I was a subcontractor, mostly alone except for an occasional call in from HQ. The facility was small, 1 desk, 1 cot, a kitchenette, and the main radio equipment. The tower rose up out of the trees like a steel skeleton. It was early October when it happened, cold enough that the ground was stiff in the mornings, but not yet snow-covered. On that particular night, I was reading a dog-eared novel, sipping instant coffee, when the emergency line crackled. Static first, then breathing. Long, heavy exhales. Wet, ANIMALISTIC. I set up. "This is relay station for B. Please respond." More breathing. Then a voice, garbled and low. "Do not go outside. I froze. Say again. But the line cut. I logged the call, marked it under possible prank, and tried to shake it off. But about 20 minutes later, the motion alarm on the southern perimeter tripped. I pulled up the feed. Nothing. The cameras glitched, grainy and erratic. I threw on my jacket and grabbed the flashlight, thinking maybe a raccoon got too close to the heat sensors. When I stepped outside, the forest was dead quiet. Not the usual chirping or rustle of small creatures. Just stillness. Then, halfway to the fence line, I saw them. Tracks. Not boot prints. Not paws. Something in between. Long toes with claws dug deep into the frozen dirt. The stride was wide. Too wide for a man. They circled the tower, stopping directly under the camera that had glitched. I followed the prints with my light until they vanished. Just ended in the middle of the trail. No backtracking. No other signs. Back inside, I tried to call it in, but the radios were down. Every frequency, every channel. Dead air. That's when I heard the thud on the roof, not small, like a sack of meat dropped from a height. Then the scratching started, slow and methodical. I pulled the shotgun from the rack under the desk, aimed it at the ceiling, and waited. I didn't move for hours. Just before dawn, everything stopped. Radio kicked back on. Power stabilized. I climbed to the roof with the rising sun, heart-pounding claw marks. Dozens of them, scored into the metal panels. Hair too, coarse, black, and foul, smelling. I never saw the thing, but I felt it. Later, a DNR officer came to inspect the damage. When I showed him the hair, he took it without a word. Said he'd file it with the wildlife lab. He never followed up. A week later, I was reassigned to a station closer to town, but I still keep the prints I photographed. Because sometimes, at night, I think I hear that same breathing over the static, and I wonder, did it follow me? My older brother Tom was never the same after he came back from the Upper Peninsula. He'd been a different guy before. Funny, wild, the kind of person who'd climb a fire tower just for the view. After that trip though, he changed. Quiet, jumpy. He wouldn't even walk past the woods near our parents' place anymore. I didn't know the whole story until years later, after I'd moved out and started a family of my own. We were sitting on the porch of our childhood home one summer evening, drinking beers. The sun had just dipped below the treetops, casting long shadows over the edge of the property. Out of nowhere, he asked, "You ever hear of the Dogman?" I nodded, like the Michigan legend, right? Big, hairy thing, walks on two legs. He looked at me dead, on eyes glassy. "It's not a legend." He told me what happened, and the way he spoke, slow. Like every word scraped something raw inside him. I'll never forget it. He and two friends, Mike and Jared, had gone camping near Fayette Historic State Park. They found a remote spot, deep in the woods, far from the trails. The first 2 days were normal, hiking, fishing, drinking. But the third night, everything shifted. They heard howling, not coyotes, not wolves. Something deeper, angrier. They joked about it, trying to keep things light, but none of them really laughed. Around 3 a.m., Tom said he woke to footsteps, slow, heavy, bipedal, not crunching through the woods like a deer, but deliberate, calculated. Something was circling the tent. Mike whispered from the other side, "You hear that?" They stayed still, listening. Then Jared screamed. Tom unzipped the tent and bolted, out with a flashlight, but Jared was gone. His sleeping bag was torn open like a wet paper bag, shredded fabric hanging from a tree branch. They searched until sunrise. No blood, no trail, just deep gouges in the bark and a foul stench that made Tom gag. They finally found Jared, or what was left of him, down by the river. Tom wouldn't describe the body, just said he wished he could forget it. They ran, didn't even pack up, drove the dirt road in silence until they hit a gas station with a payphone. Tom said the sheriff who showed up told them it was a bear attack, but the look in the deputy's eyes, he didn't believe it either, and the way the rangers acted, silent, methodical, collecting everything without questions. It was like they'd done this before. Tom never told Jared's family what really happened. Neither did Mike. After that, Tom couldn't sleep without the lights on. He started locking every door, every window, even in the middle of the day, and he never went back into the woods. That night, on the porch, he looked at me with something close to fear and said, "It's still out there. Whatever that thing was, it's not done." I believed him, and now, when the wind howls through the trees behind my house, I sometimes think of Jared, and I check my doors, just in case. I didn't want to go on that hunting trip. I told my cousin Dylan I had a weird feeling about it. Couldn't explain it. Just something gnawing at my gut. But Dylan's not the type to take no for an answer. He rented a cabin out in the remote stretches of Kentucky, said it was a once-in-a-lifetime spot. Deep woods, private land, no cell reception. We were 5 in total. Dylan, me, his buddy Chris, a quiet guy named Jace, and an older man named Roy, who was kind of a family friend, and one of those been hunting since I could walk types. He was grizzled and gray, but still sharp-eyed and lean, the kind of man you trust with a loaded weapon and not much else. The first couple of days were normal enough. Early mornings, long treks, sitting in tree stands for hours. We didn't see much, but we drank enough beer at night to laugh it off. On the third evening, Roy didn't come back from his watch. Dylan figured he'd just stayed out too late. He sometimes did that, but something felt off. The sun dipped. The forest started whispering in that unsettling way it does when everything's watching you. And I swear, I saw something tall move between the trees. Just a flash of it, a silhouette. I tried to brush it off. It's easy to see things when your nerves are wound up, but Chris saw it too. His eyes were big and wet like a scared dog's. He didn't say anything, just picked up his rifle and started checking the chamber again and again. At around 1 a.m., we heard a scream, not human, not quite animal either. It echoed across the hills like something being torn apart. Then came the silence. That kind of silence that seems to crush your lungs. You hold your breath without realizing it. Jace grabbed his flashlight and pointed it toward the tree line. "Do you hear that?" he whispered. But there was nothing to hear, just the darkness, and a faint scraping sound. Something dragging through the dirt and pine needles. Then we saw it. It stepped into the firelight like it didn't care we were there. 7, maybe 8 feet tall. Long limbs, covered in dark, coarse hair. But it wasn't a bear, and it wasn't a man. Its head was wrung, elongated, like a wolf's, but exaggerated. Its eyes glowed amber, and it had teeth too large to be anything natural. Its arms hung low and ended in claws that shimmered with something wet. We all froze, except for Dylan. He raised his rifle and fired. The creature flinched, staggered back, but it didn't fall. It roared, a low growling sound that seemed to shake the trees themselves, and charged. I don't remember running. I don't remember grabbing anything. The next thing I knew, we were sprinting through pitch black forest, branches clawing at our faces, breath ragged. Chris tripped. I heard him scream once, then nothing. Jace grabbed my arm and yanked me behind a rock outcropping. We stayed there all night, rifles drawn, listening to footsteps circle us, over and over. It never left. By morning, it was gone. We made it back to the cabin. Dylan was already there, covered in blood, half in shock. He wouldn't say a word, just rocked back and forth on the floor with the rifle clutched to his chest. They found Roy's body 3 days later, stripped of all skin from the chest down. Chris was never found. We never told the full story. The police said animal attack. We didn't argue. But I know what I saw, and I will never go into the woods again without feeling watched. We weren't supposed to be out there that night. It was me, my younger brother Tyler, and his best friend Nate. We'd taken the Jeep into the back trails behind our neighborhood in northern Michigan, an old logging road that cut through state, forest land. It was late October, the kind of night when the cold sets deep into your joints and everything sounds louder in the dark. Tyler had just gotten back from his first year of college, and we hadn't hung out in months. The plan was simple: drive out, park, light a small fire, talk, and maybe scare ourselves with some ghost stories. You know, nostalgia. It didn't go that way. The first weird thing was the silence. I don't mean the usual forest quiet. I mean complete and utter stillness. No wind, no rustling, no distant sounds of deer stepping over deadfall, no bugs. We didn't really notice it at first. We were too busy laughing, sipping from the flask Tyler had brought, tossing sticks into the fire. But about 40 minutes in, Nate stood up, turned in a slow circle, and said, "Is it just me, or is it way too quiet?" That's when I noticed it. Tyler shrugged it off. It's late fall. Everything's either asleep or dead. But his voice didn't sound confident. Not really. Then the smell hit us. It came in fast, like someone had opened a sealed bag of rotting meat just inches from your face. Tyler doubled over gagging, and Nate stepped away from the fire, shining his flashlight toward the trees. "Don't," I said. I didn't know why I said it, but something in my gut told me we were better off not knowing. We saw it anyway. The light caught something low to the ground at first. Too low. Then it rose. Slowly. It wasn't crawling, it was crouching. And then it stood, eyeshine. That's what I remember most. Pale yellow, not reflective like a deer's. Self-lit, like two sickly flashlights burning from inside its skull. Its face was wrong. Elongated, but flattened, like a dog's muzzle smashed against a windshield. And its mouth. It hung open just enough to reveal long, uneven fangs that didn't belong in anything on this planet. We froze, all of us. The creature just stared, head slightly cocked, breathing slow but audible even from that distance. Then it took one step forward. I grabbed Tyler and ran. Nate didn't move at first. He was frozen, I think. But as soon as I reached the Jeep, he was right behind me, screaming. We drove. God, we drove like hell. Hit every pothole and ditch on that old road, praying the suspension wouldn't snap. None of us spoke the whole way home, but we all knew what we saw, and we all thought it was over. But it followed us. That night I woke up at 3:22 a.m. sharp. No reason. Just snapped awake. My window was open, just a crack, but I swear I could hear breathing from the trees behind my house. Tyler called me the next day, voice shaking. He'd heard claws on his roof. Nate said, someone, or something, scratched up his back door and left muddy prints on his kitchen floor. We tried to laugh it off, act tough, play it cool, but none of us ever went back out to those woods. Nate moved to towns over. Tyler started sleeping with a shotgun under his bed, and me. Some nights, I wake up at 3:22 a.m. on the dot. Every time, I check the tree line dot, and every time, I swear, I see those same yellow eyes watching me, waiting. I was working nights back then, hauling propane tanks for a small fuel company in west central Wisconsin. It was quiet work, deliveries out to rural cabins, mostly retirees or hunters prepping for winter. I didn't mind the hours, less traffic, fewer people. That particular evening, the dispatcher sent me toward Blanchard Road, a backwoods stretch I'd only been on twice before. It snaked through dense forest, with barely any houses nearby, and by the time I got close, the sun had dipped below the treetops. The GPS lost signal halfway down the road, but I had physical paperwork with the coordinates, so I kept going. The forest felt closer than usual, like it had grown in, hungry to reclaim the road. No birds, no squirrels, just a gray hush pressing in from every direction. It started with the smell. I thought I'd blown a brake line, or maybe hit a skunk. But the stench was sharper, like copper and mildew, and roadkill mashed together. I rolled the window up halfway, but that only made it worse. Thick and cloying inside the cab. Then I heard the scream. Not human. Not even close. It echoed off the trees, too loud to be anything small. Long, drawn out, like metal scraping against metal, but organic. I instinctively slammed the brakes, heart pounding. There was movement to the left. Something big, fast. I only saw it in glimpses between trees, tall, black, upright. At first, I thought it was a bear, but bears don't move like that. They don't duck their heads and sprint on two legs like track athletes. And they sure as hell don't circle you without ever breaking branches. I stepped out of the truck against every instinct I had, clipboard in hand, trying to confirm the delivery address. That's when I heard it breathing, deep, heaving, animal lungs. I turned. There it was, no more than 20 feet away, right at the tree line. Crouched low, but not hiding, watching. Its shoulders were massive, covered in coarse, dark fur. The snout was elongated, the eyes reflecting light that wasn't there. Its teeth were uneven, yellowed, like old bone knives. But the worst part? It smiled, not like a dog panting. This thing pulled its lips back slowly, deliberately. It wanted me to see. It wanted to show it knew I was scared. I stumbled backward and hit the side of the truck. The thing didn't flinch, didn't move, just stared, until I fumbled with the door and got inside. As soon as I slammed it shut, it vanished. Not ran, vanished. Like fog pulled backward by wind. I sat there for a long time, hands shaking on the wheel, engine idling. Eventually, I finished the delivery, left the tank by the cabin porch, and peeled off back toward the main road. I didn't see it again that night, but I've never taken a route near Blanchard Road since. Weeks later, a guy from dispatch mentioned something strange in passing. Said another driver saw a wolf on stilts dart across that same road at 3 a.m. He laughed it off, but I didn't. I've never told him that I still hear that scream in my dreams, and when I wake, my window's always open just a crack, even if I locked it tight the night before. I was never a believer in monsters. Ghosts, maybe, but creatures. Things that walk on two legs and don't belong to any species we know. That was stuff for late night radio and fringe internet forums. But then something happened on my uncle's farm back in 2014 that I still can't explain. And ever since, I haven't been able to go near a field at night without checking over my shoulder every few minutes. That summer, I'd gone out to help with the harvest. My uncle Stan ran a small soybean operation in northwestern Illinois, real salt of the earth guy. I'd just finished my first year of college and offered to help with maintenance, field work, whatever he needed. He appreciated the company more than anything, said the land gets too damn quiet for the mind sometimes. One night, maybe a week into my stay, We were sitting on the back porch after dinner. It was just past 10, and the sky was clear, stars all over. You could smell the soybean plants heavy in the air. But something felt off. I don't know how else to say it. Like the pressure dropped, or the silence became too complete. That's when we heard the dogs start going nuts. My uncle had 3, usually quiet, lazy mutts, but that night, they were at the edge of the fence barking like they were seeing a home intruder. Hackles raised, teeth bared, barking at the field. Stan grabbed his old Remington and a flashlight and told me to stay inside. Of course, I didn't listen. I followed a few steps behind him as we moved out past the fence toward the soybean rows. We didn't see anything at first. The beam of the flashlight cut across the field like a knife, and there was nothing but rustling plants and moonlight. Then we found the tracks. They were massive, bigger than any wolf I've ever heard of. At least twice the size of my uncle's boot, and they were spaced like something had been walking upright. I'll never forget what he said. "These ain't coyote prints. Hell, they ain't anything. Prints." Before we could process it, we heard a deep, low growl, but not from ahead. From behind us, we spun around. There it was, maybe 30 feet away, near the tree line. It was tall, at least 7 feet, covered in dark, patchy fur. Its limbs were too long, and its torso looked almost human, but deformed, like its bones were too big for its skin. The face was the worst part. It had a muzzle, yes, but also these sharp, intelligent eyes. And its mouth, it didn't snarl. It grinned. Stan raised the rifle, but before he could shoot, the thing let out a sound that rattled my teeth. A howl, but deeper, closer to a scream. Then it dropped to all fours and bolted into the field, faster than anything I've seen before or since. We ran back to the house, locked the doors, and didn't sleep a wink. The next morning, the soybean rows where it ran were flattened, like a small truck had barreled through them, and scattered all through the field were deer carcasses, ripped apart, partially eaten, and left to rot. The sheriff came by, took photos, nodded a lot, said it was probably a cougar, but my uncle and I knew better. A week later, I went back to school. Stan called me that fall and said he was selling the place. Said he couldn't stand the nights anymore. He died 3 years ago. Never talked about what we saw again. But sometimes, when I'm alone, driving past empty fields, I swear I see something out in the rows, standing just tall enough above the crops to know it's watching and waiting. It was supposed to be a simple overnight shift. I was 23, working part-time as a technician at a small-town radio station tucked deep in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. KQRT 92.5. Barely anyone listened, unless they were on a logging road with nothing else to do. But someone had to keep the generator humming and the signal clean. And on weekends, that someone was me. The building itself was lonely. 1 floor, concrete, surrounded by a sea of pines. The radio tower rose behind it like a skeleton finger, poking into the sky. It buzzed with faint static, like it was breathing. Around 1 a.m., after doing a quick equipment check, I grabbed a cup of instant coffee and went out for a smoke. The moon was huge, so bright it looked fake. Everything had a silver sheen. The woods, the grass, even the tower glinted. And then the forest went quiet. I mean completely silent. No wind, no crickets. Not even the hum of power lines. Just dead air. I felt it before I saw it. A shift in the pressure. Like something huge was watching me from the tree line. Then I heard the first snap of a branch. Heavy, deliberate, out of instinct. I turned my flashlight on and aimed it toward the sound. 2 eyes reflected back at me, far too high off the ground. I froze. It stepped forward, just slightly, into view. It looked like a wolf, at least the head did, but its shoulders were impossibly broad, and it stood upright, the way a man does. The fur on its chest was matted and patchy. Its legs bent the wrong way, like they'd broken and healed wrong. It sniffed the air, and let out a breath I could hear from 40 feet away. I backed toward the door slowly. I didn't run. I couldn't have, even if I tried. Then something happened that froze my blood. The creature took another step and tilted its head at me, like it was curious. Then it raised a long clawed hand and tapped the metal tower behind. It pinged just once, like it knew I was there to keep that thing running, like it knew what the tower did. I turned and bolted back inside, locking the door behind me. My hands shook so badly I could barely type the emergency report. I didn't see it again that night, but around 3:40 a.m., just before my shift was over, the entire station went dead. No power, no signal, no backup. I had to sit there in the pitch dark, the only sound being the ticking of the wall clock and my own shallow breathing. When the morning tech arrived, we checked the tower. Nothing wrong, power fine, no footprints, no signs of damage. It was like it never happened. I quit a week later. Never gave a reason. Just walked out one night and never went back. But sometimes, when I can't sleep, I listen to that old station. Online, KQRT still plays static at the top of every hour. The engineers claim it's a glitch they can't fix, but I know better. That's not static, it's breathing. I didn't believe in anything. I couldn't shoot. That's what I used to say. Anyway, I was raised in rural Indiana, where the only monsters we worried about were meth heads, coyotes, and maybe a wandering bear if you got unlucky in the southern hills. My name's Travis, and back in 2017, I inherited my grandfather's farmhouse after he passed. Just a modest place, fields out front, a tree line in the back, and beyond that, a hollow we were always told to stay away from. Granddad never gave a clear reason. The land back there don't belong to us, he'd say. I thought he meant it legally, but I learned later he meant something else entirely. It started with the dogs. I had 2 coonhounds, Daisy and Buck. Smart, loyal, trained, for years. One night in late October, around 2:30 a.m., both started whining in the laundry room where they slept. I figured maybe a raccoon was near the garbage bins, so I grabbed my .22 and stepped outside with a flashlight. The moment the door creaked open, Daisy bolted out like she'd lost her damn mind, snarling, barking, crashing into the corn stalks at the edge of the field. Buck hesitated at the door, growling low with his hackles raised. That dog had never shown fear before. I called Daisy over and over, but all I heard was rustling, then silence, then a sound I've never forgotten, a yelp, high and strangled, then nothing. I found Daisy's collar the next morning, just the collar. No blood, no fur. It was almost placed there, like a message, on top of a perfectly smooth stump, just 10 feet from the hollow's edge. That night, I heard something pacing outside the house. Not the quick scamper of a fox, or the loping gait of a deer, no. These were heavy too. Legged steps, slow, deliberate. I shut off every light, and crouched by the window with my shotgun. It passed under the yard light, and I saw it clear as day. This thing, whatever it was, had the body of a bear, the legs of a man, and the head of a twisted canine. The eyes, they glowed, but not like reflection. They burned, like coals. It stopped and sniffed the air, then it looked right at me. No sound, just knowing. It walked back into the corn and disappeared. The next week was hell. I heard howls every night. Low guttural, not wolf, not coyote. Wrong. The air would turn cold. Radios would pop and hiss with static. Buck wouldn't leave the basement. I finally talked to old Mr. Riker down the road. He was in his 80s and didn't say much, but when I told him about what I'd seen, his eyes darkened. "They come from the hollow," he said. "Ain't no animal. Not by God's hand. You don't go back there. Not alone. Not armed. Not ever." He told me they used to call it the Dogman, some old story from before settlers even came here. Native tribes left that land untouched, claimed it was where the skin between worlds was too thin. I started sleeping with every door bolted, every curtain drawn, every weapon loaded. Then, one night, I heard scratching at the back door. Not claws, fingernails, long, slow, deliberate. I didn't open it. I just stood there, heart pounding. As that thing scraped a single word into the wood :mine. I moved a month later, left everything behind. Farm tools, truck, even Buck. I buried him the morning after I found him torn apart on the porch, like someone had unmade him. I don't sleep well. I don't walk near woods. And when I hear a howl on the wind, I know it's not far. It never is. Back when I was 22, I worked as a security guard for a logging operation in northern Michigan. The site was called Crooked Pine Camp, middle of nowhere, 20 miles from the nearest paved road, surrounded by endless forest. The job paid well because nobody else wanted it. Long shifts, isolation, wild animals. You name it. They had me posted from 6 p.m. to 6 a.m. in a prefab cabin with a radio and a floodlight generator. My job was simple: watch the equipment, call in anything weird, and try not to die of boredom. The first couple nights were uneventful. Cold wind, distant owls, maybe a raccoon or two sniffing around. But on the 5th night, something changed. It started with the trees going silent. You don't realize how loud the woods are until they stop. No crickets, no birds, not even the wind rustling. Just an unnatural stillness that made the hairs on my neck stand up. Then the smell hit me. Wet fur and copper. Blood. I stepped outside with my flashlight and swept the beam across the clearing. That's when I saw them, not eyes. Shadows moving, where there shouldn't have been any. Just beyond the tree line, tall figures shifting just out of the light's reach. One of them stepped forward. It was massive, 7 feet, easy, hunched. Long arms ending in clawed hands. A canine head, but distorted. Too wide at the jaw. Too many teeth. Its legs were jointed wrong, like a digitigrade animal, but it walked upright like a man. I froze. Couldn't even breathe. It stared at me for a long minute. Then it let out a low, vibrating growl that I felt in my chest. I ran back into the cabin, locked the door, and radioed the base. Static. No response. Then the scratching began. Not a frantic attack. Just slow, dragging claws across the wall panels. Around the cabin, one side to the other. They were circling, playing with me. I kept the shotgun in my lap and the floodlights on. Hours passed. I couldn't see them anymore, but I knew they were out there. I could feel them, watching. When dawn finally broke, the noises stopped. The sun peeked over the tree line and everything went back to normal. Birds chirping, wind blowing. Just like that, the relief crew arrived 2 hours late. When I told them what happened, they exchanged looks, and one of them muttered, he saw. It turns out, this wasn't the first time. Every few years, someone would report something big in the woods. Trees torn out of the ground, howling like no wolf could make. One guy even quit on the spot after finding deep claw marks etched into the metal bulldozer cab. I quit 2 days later. I packed up and left. I still hear that growl sometimes when I'm half asleep, and every now and then I wake up to find claw marks in the frost on my windows, far from Michigan, but not far enough. wasn't supposed to be anything more than a weekend getaway. My cousin Derek had just bought some land out near the western edge of Wisconsin. Deep woods, a private lake, total off-grid living. He invited me, and a couple of our buddies too, come out for beer, fishing, and a break from the chaos of our everyday lives. I work in IT. I spend more time with servers than people. I needed it. We got there late on a Friday. Derek's cabin was rough. 2 rooms, no insulation, barely any signal. Just a propane stove, lanterns, and a rusted wood stove that smoked if you didn't stoke it right. We laughed, cracked a few beers, and roasted hot dogs over the fire pit out back. The first night passed quietly, if cold. But the second night, something was wrong. It started with the sound of the woods shifting. I've camped enough to know what a deer sounds like, even a bear. But this was something else, something heavier, but moving too fast for its size. I was out behind the cabin, taking a leak, when I heard it, snapping twigs, a quick rustle. Not like a squirrel, not even like a deer bolting. It was more like a large dog running, but on 2 legs. When I turned to look, I caught just a flicker of motion between the trees. Something tall, black, hunched forward. It disappeared in a blink. I backed into the cabin and didn't say anything. I didn't want to be that guy. Maybe it was just nerves. But later that night, Derek's dog, Tucker, a big old lab mix, started growling. Not barking, just growling low in his throat, his hackles raised, eyes glued to the window. Then the scratching started. Not loud, subtle, like claws tracing slow circles along the siding, like something trying to tease us. Derek grabbed the shotgun. I held the flashlight. The others thought we were overreacting until the howling started. This wasn't a wolf's howl. It was too guttural, too close. And it went on for almost a full minute, rising in pitch like it was calling something. Then we heard the reply dot from across the lake. That was when we saw it. It stepped into the clearing just at the edge of the tree line, 7 or 8 feet tall, matted fur, a hunched posture, with arms too long for its frame. Its legs bent backwards like a dog's, but it stood there, upright. Watching us, its eyes reflected the light, not just like an animal, but like they knew what they were seeing. It didn't flinch when Derek raised the shotgun, didn't move when I turned the flashlight directly at it, and then, in a flash, it was gone. We stayed up the rest of the night, weapons in hand. Come dawn, we packed up and left. None of us said much on the way back, not even Derek. But here's the thing. When I got home, hundreds of miles away, I noticed something strange. My backyard motion light kept going off, every night. Always between 2 and 3 a.m. At first I thought it was raccoons. Then, one morning, I found long scratches on the side of my garage. Deep ones, like claws had dug in. 3 vertical gaps, each one nearly a foot long. I set up a trail cam. It didn't record anything, but the next morning, the camera was gone. Just gone, no sign of it. Just more scratch marks on the tree it had been strapped to. And prints, too big for any dog, too defined to be human. Something followed me home, and I think it's still watching. I never really knew why my dad stopped going into the woods. He was a lifelong hunter, taught me how to shoot, how to track, how to read the wind. But something happened when I was 13 that changed him forever. We lived in Michigan, right? Near Manistee National Forest. Our house backed right up to dense woods that stretched for miles. Every fall, we'd go hunting together. But after one trip in particular, he hung up his rifle and never went back. He wouldn't talk about it. Not to my mom, not to me. He didn't even clean his gear afterward, just packed it all away and locked it in the basement. It was years before I found out why. I was 26 when he got sick. Lung cancer, the kind that doesn't give you a lot of time. Toward the end, he started having these fits at night. Nightmares. He'd shout, "Don't look at it," and it's watching us. Over and over. One night, while I was helping him into bed, I finally asked, "Dad, what happened in the woods that year?" He looked at me for a long time, eyes glassy, hollowed out, and then he told me. He and his buddy Rick had gone out for a weekend hunt near Bear Creek. They had a campfire, some whiskey, the usual, but that night, just past midnight, they heard something circling their tent. Not a bear, not a coyote. This thing walked on two legs. They stayed quiet, rifles ready, but when morning came, they found tracks all around the tent. Huge tracks. Like a wolf's, but upright. He said it looked like it had toes. Human toes, long and misshapen. Rick wanted to pack up and leave, but my dad was stubborn. They stayed. That next night, it got worse. They heard it breathing, just outside. The canvas, low, huffing breaths. Then it scratched the tent, slowly, like it wanted them to know it could rip through any time it wanted. And then Rick did something stupid. He unzipped the flap and shined his flashlight outside. My dad said he'll never forget the sound Rick made, a kind of half scream, half gasp. The flashlight hit the creature dead on. It was crouched low, maybe 6 feet away, tall as a man, but covered in coarse, black fur. Its snout was long, but the eyes were too human, intelligent, malevolent, and its mouth was open, tongue lolling like a dog, but it was grinning. They fired at it, emptied both rifles, but by the time they ran out and looked, it was gone. No blood, just the lingering smell of rotting meat and wet fur. They left that morning. Rick never went back to the woods either. A year later, he was found dead in his garage, carbon monoxide poisoning. The official story was suicide, but my dad didn't believe that. He said the thing had followed them home, said he'd seen it twice, standing at the edge of the trees, behind our house, just watching. "Why didn't you tell me this before?" I asked him. He just said, "Because once you know it's real, it knows you know." Dad passed away 3 days later, and now, I swear, sometimes when I walk past the tree line out back, I feel it too, like something's still out there, waiting. I never thought I'd say this, but the night my truck broke down in rural Iowa might have saved my life and ruined it all at once. It was August, and I was hauling equipment back from a demolition job near Cedar Rapids. I took a back route to shave off time, a lonely county road flanked by endless fields of corn that stood well over 7 feet high. My GPS glitched out about 20 miles in, and that's when the truck just gave out. Dead as a doornail. I cursed, kicked the tire, popped the hood. Nothing looked obviously wrong. The sun was already dipping, casting everything in that orange glow that makes familiar things feel off. I called roadside assistance. "We'll be there in an hour and a half," they said. Great. So I sat in the cab, windows rolled down, the sound of insects buzzing louder than usual. Then I noticed something strange. The bugs stopped. Not a cricket, not a mosquito, not even the wind rustling the stalks. Just dead silence. That's when I heard it. A crunch. Something was moving in the corn, not an animal scurrying. This was heavier, rhythmic, almost deliberate. Something bipedal. I leaned out of the window and stared toward the field. At first, I thought I saw a deer, but no, it was upright. Maybe a man. But there was no farm nearby. Nobody should have been out there. Then it stepped closer to the edge of the field, and I saw it in full. It stood at least 7 feet tall, built like a linebacker, covered in short bristled fur. The shape of a wolf, but on 2 legs, arms hanging. low and muscular, claws that seemed to twitch with each step. The head. God, the head looked like something out of a nightmare. Long muzzle, ears cocked forward, and yellow eyes glowing faintly even in the fading light. It saw me. I could feel it. There was an intensity in its stare, like it was deciding whether to attack or just watch. I didn't move, didn't breathe. Then it opened its mouth. A low, guttural growl rolled out, vibrating through my chest like a bass drum. It took a step toward the ditch between the field and the road. Another step, my body finally reacted. I slammed the lock button, rolled the window up, and ducked under the dashboard like a terrified kid. I stayed there, eyes shut, waiting to hear claws on metal or glass breaking. But it never came. After what felt like hours, I peeked over the edge of the dashboard. It was gone. When the tow truck finally arrived, I didn't tell the guy what I saw, just muttered something about coyotes. But I know what I saw. I went back to the spot the next day in daylight. There were tracks, huge, deep impressions in the dirt, shaped like elongated paws. I never used that road again. And sometimes, when I'm outside my house at night, I swear I see cornstalks moving in the dark, even though there's no field nearby. Was fresh out of college when it happened. My best friend Jesse and I decided to spend a weekend camping in Michigan's Upper Peninsula, not the touristy parts, somewhere remote, off the grid, where we could fish, drink beer, and pretend we weren't heading back to jobs we already hated. We ended up near the Antonigan River. There was this primitive campsite only accessible by a narrow dirt trail that barely qualified as a road. No cell signal, no rangers, just trees and silence. It was perfect, until it wasn't. The first day was great. We fished, built a fire, grilled some trout, shared a bottle of bourbon, and crashed in our tent just after midnight. Sometime around 3 a.m., I woke up needing to pee. The fire was mostly out, just embers, and everything was quiet, except for the river murmuring nearby. I walked about 10 yards from the tent with my flashlight, did my business, and was just zipping up when I heard something splash upriver. At first, I thought it was a deer, but the splashing was too heavy, too steady. It was waiting, not running. I aimed my flashlight toward the sound and froze. There was something standing in the river, at least 8 feet tall, broad, shouldered, with a head like a German shepherd. Its eyes reflected the beam, glowing gold. It wasn't fur exactly, more like something rough and matted, wet from the water. Its legs were bent like a dog's, but it was standing upright. I couldn't move, couldn't blink. My brain just refused to process what I was seeing. Then it took a step toward the bank. The moment it did, I stumbled backward and ran, full sprint, back to the tent. Jesse sat up instantly when I crashed through the flap. "Dude, what the hell? There's something in the river," I gasped. "Something wrong." He thought I was drunk or joking until we heard it. A deep, raspy breath, like something with a massive chest was sniffing the air just outside our tent. Then, a slow drag of claws over the nylon wall, soft at first. Testing. Jesse's face went pale. He whispered, "We need to run." "No," I mouthed back. "It's hunting." We sat there in silence for what felt like hours, too afraid to even breathe. The creature circled us once. Then we heard it move back toward the river. At dawn, we packed up and hiked out without speaking a word. I've never been camping since. A few months later, Jesse sent me an article. It was about Dogman sightings. I had never heard of that name before, but when I saw one of the sketches in the article, I dropped my phone. It was exactly what I saw. Sometimes I still dream about it. I hear the river, the breathing, the slow scrape of claws, and always, I wake up feeling like it's still watching me. was a trucker for almost 12 years, and I've driven through every kind of weather, road, and empty stretch of America you can imagine. You learn to love the solitude after a while, or at least you convince yourself it's better than sitting behind a desk. But there's one night out on a back road in Kentucky that still makes me question if I was ever alone on the road at all. It was early October, just after dusk, and I was running behind schedule because of an earlier breakdown. My route was supposed to stay on the main highway, but I made a last-minute decision to cut through an old service road near Daniel Boone National Forest. My GPS didn't even register it properly, but I'd taken it once, years ago, and I remembered. It shaved at least 45 minutes off the trip. The pavement turned to gravel quickly, and then just dirt. I slowed down to maybe 25 miles per hour, trying not to bounce too hard over potholes and tree roots. The forest pressed in on both sides, and I had to keep my high beams on just to see more than 20 feet ahead. It was dead quiet, no other cars, no houses, just wilderness. Then I saw something standing on the road. It was right in the middle, tall and thin, facing away from me. At first I thought it was a deer standing on two legs. I know how that sounds, but it wasn't a bear. I've seen plenty of bears in my life, and this thing had a long, narrow snout, like a wolf, but too big. Its arms were oddly long, and its claws reflected in my lights like they were wet. I slowed the truck to a stop. It didn't move. Then, slowly, it turned its head, just its head, and looked right into my windshield. I felt a pressure in my chest, like I was being stared down by something that wasn't just curious. It was aware. It was calculating. I blinked, and it was gone, just like that. 1 second it was there, and the next, nothing. No sound, no rustling, nothing. But I swear I felt it move, like it was circling. I hit the gas and got out of there, fast. The trees blurred by, and for a split second, I swear I saw it again, running alongside the truck, not behind, beside. It was keeping up with me at nearly 40 miles per hour. I didn't stop until I got to the next major town. I parked in a well-lit truck stop, and just sat there, engine running, hand shaking so bad I couldn't even pour myself coffee. The next day, I told my dispatcher I wouldn't be taking that route again. Didn't give him a reason. I've never seen it since, but every time I drive at night now, especially through thick woods, I find myself watching the tree line, waiting, because I think it remembers me too. It was after my mother passed that I finally came back to the place I swore I'd never return to, my childhood home in western Michigan. The land had been in our family for generations, 100 acres of forest and field bordered by old iron fencing, the kind that was more for show than security. After the funeral, I stayed behind to settle her affairs, clean up the property, and figure out what to do with the place. That's when it happened. I remember it was a Sunday evening, clear skies, no wind, not even the usual songbirds, the kind of stillness that makes the back of your neck tighten. I was burning some old wood out by the collapsed barn, thinking about selling the house, when I heard something in the woods. It was a sharp, deliberate crack of a branch, like something heavy had stepped on it. I stood still. It wasn't a deer. Deer are quick and light, and they make that telltale rustle. This was something heavier. I called out, thinking maybe it was a lost hiker or some kids. Nothing, but then I smelled it. A thick, coppery stench, like rotting meat mixed with wet dog. It hit the back of my throat and made my eyes water. I backed away from the fire and grabbed the axe I'd been using to split wood. The woods were dense, but the edge was only about 20 yards from where I stood. That's when I saw it, eyes, reflecting orange in the firelight, just between the trees, low to the ground at first. Then they rose, high, way too high for any normal animal. I froze. Couldn't breathe. It stepped out. 7 feet tall, maybe more, lean, but not skinny. Muscles under dark, matted fur. Long limbs, claws like curved. Knives, and a snout. Long canine, but twisted in a way that made it seem wrong. It looked at me not like prey, but like competition. I wanted to run. Every cell in my body was screaming to run, but I didn't. I lifted the axe instead and stared it down. It took 1 step forward, then another. It stopped just shy of the firelight, sniffing the air, eyes locked onto me, and then, without a sound, it turned and disappeared back into the woods. The silence came back just as suddenly. No birds, no bugs, not even the fire crackling. That night, I didn't sleep. Over the next 3 days, I kept seeing signs, claw marks on the shed, piles of bones near the creek bed, that same god-awful smell lingering by the house at dawn. I installed motion cameras. They never caught more than a blur, too fast. Too smart to be caught fully. I found a neighbor, Mrs. Lawson, an old widow living 2 miles down the road. When I finally got the nerve to ask her if she'd seen anything strange around the woods, she just nodded slowly. "You saw it," she said. "Same one that took my husband's dogs. Same one that killed the goats out at the Miller farm last spring. Been here a long time. Why doesn't anyone do anything?" She looked at me with tired eyes and said, "You don't deal with things like that. You respect them. You stay out of their way. That's the only way." I left the next week. Didn't sell the house. Didn't burn it down either. It still sits there, boarded up, untouched. Because some places aren't meant to be reclaimed. Some creatures aren't meant to be confronted, and the forest out back, it still watches, still waits. When I was 19, I worked the night shift at a gas station just off Route 39 in Kentucky. It was the kind of job you take when you've got no real plan. Cash under the table, free coffee, and no one asking too many questions. I didn't have a car, so I used to cut through a stretch of woods known as Hollow Pine to get to the station faster. Locals warned against it, saying weird stuff happened there, especially after dark. I figured it was just superstitious talk. I only needed to walk the trail once to realize they weren't joking. It was late September, the air still clinging to the last breath of summer. That night, I was running behind, so I took the shortcut through Hollow Pine. The woods were quiet, too quiet, but I chalked it up to my nerves. About halfway through the trail, I started hearing footsteps, heavy ones, like boots on wet leaves. I turned around, expecting to see some late-night hiker, or maybe another shortcut taker like me. No one. Then I heard breathing, deep, raspy, and close. The trail narrowed, flanked by trees with bark blackened from old lightning strikes. I kept walking faster now, and the footsteps matched my pace. Every time I stopped, they stopped. Every time I ran, they ran. I glanced over my shoulder, and that's when I saw it. Standing off to the side of the trail was something enormous, half shadowed in the underbrush. It stood upright, broad shoulders slouched forward, arms long enough to brush the tops of the ferns. Its head was unmistakably canine, long snout, pointed ears, but the eyes, they were human-like, intelligent, angry. It didn't chase me, not yet. It just watched. I backed away, not taking my eyes off it, then turned and ran harder than I ever have in my life. I don't remember how I made it out of those woods. I don't remember hitting the gravel of the roadside or reaching the gas station. All I remember is slamming the door shut behind me and collapsing behind the counter, sweating, panting, shaking. For a week, I refused to go through those woods. I added an extra 40 minutes to my commute and didn't care. But curiosity gets stupid real fast when you're 19 and bored. One night, I took the trail again, only this time during daylight. I needed to prove to myself I hadn't imagined it. Halfway through, I found something I hadn't noticed before, a series of deep claw marks gouged into a tree, and a pile of small bones stacked neatly beneath it, like some kind of offering. The air smelled metallic and wrong. I turned back. That was the last time I ever used that shortcut. A few months later, a hiker went missing in Hollow Pine. The search party found his backpack, his camera, and nothing else. Locals blamed it on a bear or a meth lab gone bad, but I knew better, because some nights, especially when the wind is right, I swear I can still hear the breathing just beyond the edge of the woods, and it's waiting for someone else to take the shortcut. It's funny how the mind can suppress memories, like it knows there are some things too horrible to remember. But no matter how hard I tried to forget, that night in the cabin always crept back into my thoughts. No matter how much time passed, the howl would always echo in my mind. I was up in the northern woods of Michigan, staying in a cabin owned by my cousin Aaron. He had been going on about how peaceful it was up there, how it was the perfect escape from city life, and he was right. It was beautiful, a retreat from the noise and chaos, with the nearest neighbor miles away. It was quiet, a little eerie, but serene in its own way. I never planned on going back after that night. Aaron and I had spent the first couple of days hiking through the woods, fishing in a nearby lake, and just enjoying the solitude. It was the kind of peace I had never really known. We sat by the fire, laughed, drank beer, and traded stories late into the night. The air was crisp, and the wind would rustle the leaves, but nothing unusual happened. That was until the fourth night. It was getting close to midnight when I heard it. I'd gone out to the porch to get a breath of fresh air, away from the buzz of our conversation. The woods were always thick with sounds, the chirps of crickets, the rustle of small animals in the underbrush. But then I heard something different, something that chilled me to the bone. It was a low growl, deeper than anything I had heard before. I figured it was some sort of animal, a coyote or something, but then the growl turned into a distinct howl, long, eerie, and filled with something primal. I froze, trying to place it. The sound didn't belong to any animal I knew. It was too loud, too deep, and it seemed to come from all around us. The air felt thick, as if the forest itself had gone still, waiting for something. I stepped back into the cabin. Aaron was still inside, sipping his drink. He looked at me, eyebrows raised. "You hear that?" I asked. He nodded, face pale. "Yeah, sounds like a wolf, but not right." I didn't say anything more. We both knew that wolves weren't in this part of the woods. I could see the unease growing in his eyes. I wasn't the only one who was unsettled. For a few minutes, we both sat in silence, trying to brush off the feeling of dread that was slowly creeping up on us. But then came another howl. This time it was closer. I could feel the ground vibrate beneath me, as if the thing was right outside. Aaron stood abruptly, setting his drink down with a clang. "We need to check this out," he said. But I could see it in his eyes. He was terrified. We grabbed flashlights, checked the rifle we'd brought for the trip, and cautiously stepped outside. The wind was biting, the air colder than it should have been for that time of year. We moved quietly, trying to keep our presence undetected, but the further we went into the woods, the worse the feeling got. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up, and my breath came out in sharp, visible bursts. The howl came again, louder this time, cutting through the trees like a knife. And then, in the distance, I saw something, movement. The trees were too dense, and it was hard to make out exactly what I was seeing, but it was massive. Not a bear, not a deer, but something taller, broader, and off. Aaron grabbed my arm, his hand ice cold. "We need to go back," he whispered, barely able to breathe. I tried to protest, but then I heard the unmistakable crunch of twigs. Something heavy was moving toward us, and then I saw it, standing at the edge of the trees, watching us with glowing, yellow eyes. The creature was massive, hunched like a wolf, but its arms were long, and its legs bent in unnatural ways. It was covered in matted fur, its chest heaving, saliva dripping from its snout. Its face was a grotesque mix of canine and human features, and its teeth were far too large. It wasn't just an animal, it was something else entirely. I don't remember how we got back to the cabin. 1 second, we were frozen in fear, and the next, we were running, stumbling over the thick underbrush. I could hear it behind us, its claws scraping against bark, its breath coming in quick, jagged bursts. We made it back to the cabin, slamming the door behind us, hearts pounding in our chests. The howl came again, this time directly outside the cabin, so close I could feel it in my bones. We locked every door and window, grabbing anything we could as makeshift weapons. The rest of the night was a blur. We stayed awake, listening to the thing circling the cabin, its growls and howls growing louder, angrier. At some point, it stopped. We didn't know if it was still out there, waiting, or if it had left. By the time morning came, there was no sign of it. No prints in the snow, no hair caught on the trees, no blood. It was as if it had never been there at all. But Aaron and I both knew better. We never spoke of that night again, but we never went back to the cabin either. It's been 5 years since that night. I've moved far away now, settled in the city, trying to forget the things I saw. But sometimes, when I'm alone in bed, I hear a howl in the distance, and I can't help but wonder if it's waiting for me to come back. I had always been an outdoors person. Ever since I was a kid, I'd found solace in the woods, the quiet serenity, the feeling of being miles away from the world's troubles. The deep woods of the Upper Peninsula in Michigan were my favorite. My friends and I had made a tradition out of camping there every summer for the past 5 years. But nothing could prepare me for what happened that night. It was late June, and the days were growing longer. The sun barely set, and the warmth of summer filled the air. We had set up camp by the creek, a place we'd been to countless times. The campfire crackled and popped as we roasted marshmallows and told stories. Everything was normal, until it WASN's single quotes. It was just me and my buddy Jason that night. Our other friends had already turned in for the night, retreating to their tents, as the sky darkened. But Jason and I, we were still sitting around the fire, talking about life and cracking jokes. We weren't ready to sleep. The firelight flickered, and we could hear the usual sounds of the forest, the chirping of crickets, the rustling of small animals in the underbrush, the occasional hoot of an owl. Then, something changed. The forest grew unnervingly quiet, as though the very woods were holding their breath. I looked over at Jason, who had stopped talking. His face was pale, his eyes wide, staring at something just beyond the tree line. I followed his gaze, but at first, I didn't see anything. "Do you hear that?" Jason asked, his voice barely above a whisper. I strained my ears, but I didn't hear anything at first. Then it came again, a low, guttural growl, almost like the sound of a large animal, but deeper, much deeper. "Probably just a bear," I said, though I wasn't convinced myself. The sound didn't feel right. It felt too intentional, too menacing. Jason was already standing up, his hands trembling as he reached for the flashlight. "I don't think that's a bear," he muttered, his voice shaking. I stood up too, trying to laugh it off. "We've been out here a dozen times, Jace. It's probably just a wolf or something. Nothing to worry about." But even as I said it, I knew something wasn't right. The hair on the back of my neck stood up. We both turned toward the woods, our eyes scanning the dark tree line. And then, I saw it. A figure, huge, dark, and unnatural. It wasn't a bear. It wasn't anything I had ever seen before. The creature was standing motionless, just outside the range of the firelight, watching us. I couldn't make out the details clearly, but I could see enough to know that it was massive, at least 7 feet tall, its broad shoulders rippling with muscle. Its face was obscured in the shadows, but I could make out the glowing yellow eyes, staring back at us. Jason didn't hesitate. He grabbed my arm and yanked me toward the tent, his breathing fast and frantic. "We need to go now," he hissed, pulling me away from the fire. I was frozen for a moment, still staring at the figure in the woods. It didn't move, didn't make a sound. It just stood there, watching as Jason and I scrambled to the tent. I heard the sound again, the low growl, louder this time. It was getting closer, the earth seeming to vibrate with each step. We didn't even stop to zip the tent shut properly. We just collapsed inside, grabbing the flashlight and shining it out through the thin fabric. The growling stopped for a moment, and in the eerie silence, we could hear something else. Footsteps, heavy, deliberate, and slow. The thing was circling our camp. We could hear the brush moving, the snap of twigs, but it wasn't just walking. It was pacing. Jason and I lay there, holding our breath, praying it wouldn't come any closer. But then, the unmistakable sound of claws scraping against the side of our tent made my blood run cold. Whatever it was right next to us now. "Don't move," Jason whispered, his voice trembling. "Don't make a sound." I could hear it breathing, deep, heavy breaths, as though it were waiting for us to make the next move. We stayed completely still, not daring to make a sound. The growling stopped for a while, but we could still hear the pacing outside, the occasional scrape of claws against the ground. It was like the thing knew we were there, knew exactly where we were hiding. Minutes felt like hours. And then, just as suddenly as it had appeared, the sound of the creature faded into the distance. The pacing stopped. The growls ceased. We waited, not daring to breathe, listening for any sign that it was still nearby. When we finally felt brave enough to peek outside, the forest was still silent. There was no sign of the creature. It was as though it had vanished into thin air. Jason and I didn't sleep a wink that night. We stayed up, clutching the flashlight, listening for any sounds in the dark. But the rest of the night was uneventful. The creature never returned, and when the sun rose, we packed up and left, not bothering to make breakfast or say goodbye to the camp. To this day, I don't know what we saw. We never told anyone else about it, because no one would believe us. But Jason and I know the truth, and every time I go camping, even in the daytime, I can't shake the feeling that something is watching me, waiting, just out of sight in the trees. I had always been an outdoors person. Ever since I was a kid, I'd found solace in the woods, the quiet serenity, the feeling of being miles away from the world's troubles. The deep woods of the Upper Peninsula in Michigan were my favorite. My friends and I had made a tradition out of camping there every summer for the past 5 years. But nothing could prepare me for what happened that night. It was late June, and the days were growing longer. The sun barely set, and the warmth of summer filled the air. We had set up camp by the creek, a place we'd been to countless times. The campfire crackled and popped as we roasted marshmallows and told stories. Everything was normal, until it WASN single quotes. It was just me and my buddy Jason that night. Our other friends had already turned in for the night, retreating to their tents. As the sky darkened, but Jason and I, we were still sitting around the fire, talking about life, and cracking jokes. We weren't ready to sleep. The firelight flickered, and we could hear the usual sounds of the forest, the chirping of crickets, the rustling of small animals in the underbrush, the occasional hoot of an owl. Then, something changed. The forest grew unnervingly quiet, as though the very woods were holding their breath. I looked over at Jason, who had stopped talking. His face was pale, his eyes wide, staring at something just beyond the tree line. I followed his gaze, but at first, I didn't see anything. "Do you hear that?" Jason asked, his voice barely above a whisper. I strained my ears, but I didn't hear anything at first. Then it came again, a low guttural growl, almost like the sound of a large animal, but deeper, much deeper. "Probably just a bear," I said, though I wasn't convinced myself. The sound didn't feel right. It felt too intentional, too menacing. Jason was already standing up, his hands trembling as he reached for the flashlight. "I don't think that's a bear," he muttered, his voice shaking. I stood up too, trying to laugh it off. "We've been out here a dozen times, Jace. It's probably just a wolf or something. Nothing to worry about." But even as I said it, I knew something wasn't right. The hair on the back of my neck stood up. We both turned toward the woods, our eyes scanning the dark tree line. And then, I saw it, a figure, huge, dark, and unnatural. It wasn't a bear. It wasn't anything I had ever seen before. The creature was standing motionless, just outside the range of the firelight, watching us. I couldn't make out the details clearly, but I could see enough to know that it was massive, at least 7 feet tall, its broad shoulders rippling with muscle. Its face was obscured in the shadows, but I could make out the glowing yellow eyes. Staring back at us, Jason didn't hesitate. He grabbed my arm and yanked me toward the tent, his breathing fast and frantic. "We need to go now," he hissed, pulling me away from the fire. I was frozen for a moment, still staring at the figure in the woods. It didn't move, didn't make a sound. It just stood there, watching. As Jason and I scrambled to the tent, I heard the sound again, the low growl, louder this time. It was getting closer, the earth seeming to vibrate with each step. We didn't even stop to zip the tent shut properly. We just collapsed inside, grabbing the flashlight and shining it out through the thin fabric. The growling stopped for a moment, and in the eerie silence, we could hear something else. Footsteps, heavy, deliberate, and slow. The thing was circling our camp. We could hear the brush moving, the snap of twigs, but it wasn't just walking. It was pacing. Jason and I lay there, holding our breath, praying it wouldn't come any closer. But then, the unmistakable sound of claws scraping against the side of our tent made my blood run cold. Whatever it was right next to us now. "Don't move," Jason whispered, his voice trembling. "Don't make a sound." I could hear it breathing, deep, heavy breaths, as though it were waiting for us to make the next move. We stayed completely still, not daring to make a sound. The growling stopped for a while, but we could still hear the pacing outside, the occasional scrape of claws against the ground. It was like the thing knew we were there, knew exactly where we were hiding. Minutes felt like hours, and then, just as suddenly as it had appeared, the sound of the creature faded into the distance. The pacing stopped. The growls ceased. We waited, not daring to breathe, listening for any sign that it was still nearby. When we finally felt brave enough to peek, outside, the forest was still, silent. There was no sign of the creature. It was as though it had vanished into thin air. Jason and I didn't sleep a wink that night. We stayed up, clutching the flashlight, listening for any sounds in the dark. But the rest of the night was uneventful. The creature never returned, and when the sun rose, we packed up and left, not bothering to make breakfast or say goodbye to the camp. To this day, I don't know what we saw. We never told anyone else about it, because no one would believe us. But Jason and I know the truth, and every time I go camping, even in the daytime. I can't shake the feeling that something is watching me, waiting, just out of sight in the trees. It was the last summer before I left for college, and I had taken a part-time job helping my uncle on his farm in southern Illinois. Most of my days were spent fixing fences, stacking hay, and sweating under the sun. But the nights were a different world altogether. Quiet, still, almost too still. And then, one night, everything changed. I had just finished a long day's work and was relaxing on the porch with a cold soda, watching the moonlight spill across the wide fields. The corn was tall that year, almost 7 feet in places, and swayed gently in the breeze like waves on a dark sea. My uncle had already gone to bed, and I was enjoying the peace, alone with the hum of crickets. That's when I saw movement. At first, I figured it was a deer. Happens all the time out there. Animals come and go through the rows, but something about the way it moved caught my eye. It wasn't graceful like a deer. It was jerky, almost like it was trying to stay hidden, but didn't quite know how. I stood up, stepped off the porch, and squinted toward the far end of the field. The moon was bright, but not enough to see clearly. Still, I could make out a silhouette, a big one, way too big for a deer. That's when I heard the breathing, heavy, wet, close. I froze. The sound wasn't coming from the field. It was behind me. I spun around, and for a moment, I thought I saw a trick of the light. But no, there it was, not 10 feet from me, standing just beyond the edge of the porch light. It was tall, easily over 7 feet, and its body was covered in dark, matted fur. Its legs were bent backward like a dog's, and its arms, yes, arms, hung long and thick at its sides. But it was the head that chilled me to my soul. It was unmistakably canine, long snout, pointed ears, but with eyes far too intelligent. And those eyes were locked on me. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. Every part of me screamed to run, but something deeper knew that running would only make it worse. The thing sniffed the air like it was trying to memorize my scent. Then it stepped forward, into the light. Its claws tapped against the wooden boards of the porch. It was real. It was right there suddenly. From inside the house, my uncle's old hound started barking like mad. The creature snarled, showing a row of jagged teeth, then turned and bolted into the cornfield with terrifying speed. Within seconds, the rows were silent again. No rustling, no footsteps. It was gone. I ran inside and locked every door and window. I didn't sleep that night. The next morning, I found huge prints, half canine, half human, just below the porch. The boards where it had stood were scratched, deep. I never told my uncle. He wouldn't have believed me. But when I left for college, a week later, I never looked back. I've never returned to that farm. But sometimes, late at night, when the wind rustles just right, I can still hear the thing breathing, heavy, wet, and far too close. Back in 2012, I took a job as a night security guard for a mining equipment yard out in western Pennsylvania, just outside of Clarion. It wasn't a glamorous gig. Mostly it involved sitting in a beat-up trailer from dusk till dawn, watching security monitors, and occasionally walking the fence perimeter with a flashlight. Boring, quiet, and perfect for someone like me who was trying to get their life back together after a messy divorce. The yard itself was massive, surrounded by chain link fencing topped with razor wire. Old bulldozers, diggers, and equipment. Parts littered the grounds. Beyond that fence was just woods, thick, dark, and never-ending. I always thought the forest had a weight to it, like it was holding its breath. One night in mid-October, the air had just turned sharp with the bite of coming winter. Around 2 a.m., I stepped outside for a smoke break. The trailer was getting stuffy, and the hum of the monitors was giving me a headache. I walked around the back where the floodlights didn't reach and leaned against the metal siding, looking up at the stars. That's when I heard it. A crunch. Like something stepping on gravel. At first I thought it was maybe a raccoon or deer. We got those a lot near the edge of the woods. I flicked on my flashlight and swept it toward the noise. Nothing. I turned the beam off and lit my cigarette again. That's when the real sound started. Closer this time, breathing, low, guttural, ragged. It wasn't like a man panting, and it wasn't like a dog either. It sounded like something trying to keep quiet, but struggling. I froze, cigarette half, raised to my mouth. Then, just beyond the faint light from the trailer window, I saw something move. It stepped forward. I could see the outline, tall, at least 7 feet. It was on 2 legs, but the shape was all wrong. The shoulders were broad, and its arms hung long, hands reaching just above the knees. Its head was wrong, like a wolf, but the way it moved, the way it watched me, it wasn't an animal. It was something else. It stopped about 30 feet from me, near the edge of the tree line. I raised the flashlight again and pointed it straight at the thing. The eyes reflected the beam, bright, pale yellow, and for a second, I saw its face clearly. A snout, long, with wet black lips, pulled back over jagged teeth. Its ears were upright, twitching like a predator, listening for weakness. It took a step forward, and its claws tapped the gravel. I stumbled backward, tripping over a coil of wire on the ground. My flashlight flew from my hand, and I scrambled to my feet in blind panic. I didn't look back. I ran straight into the trailer and slammed the door, locking it behind me. Through the small window, I watched. The thing didn't charge. It didn't even flinch. It just stood there, breathing like a furnace. Then it turned, walked, not ran, back into the trees. I didn't leave that trailer until sunrise. When the day crew came in, I tried to play it cool, but I couldn't shake the feeling. I asked one of the older guys if there were ever reports of strange animals around. He looked at me long and hard, then nodded once. "You ever hear of the Dogman?" he asked. I hadn't. He told me stories, local legends, things whispered by hunters and old-timers. A creature that walks like a man but hunts like a wolf. He said he saw it once when he was young, up near Cook Forest. You see it once, you don't forget. But you're lucky, he said. If it wants to hurt you, it doesn't stand there and stare. I quit that job a week later. Told them it was for personal reasons. Maybe it was. But every so often, when I hear something howling in the night, from too far off, I remember those eyes glowing in the dark. And I remember it walked on 2 legs. It had been over a decade since I last visited my grandfather's cabin in northern Michigan. After he passed, the property sat untouched, quiet, slowly swallowed by the forest. Life had moved on. So had I. But when I got laid off in the city, rent became unbearable. I figured maybe a few months off the grid would give me time to reset. Just me, a backpack full of essentials, and the solitude of pine and birch. The place was exactly as I remembered. Crooked porch, chipped green paint, rusted well pump out back. Dust blanketed everything inside. Still, it had this strange comfort to it, like the woods had kept it safe just for me. I spent my first week cleaning, chopping wood, and hiking familiar trails. It was peaceful, the kind of peace that makes you forget how loud the world really is. That changed on the 12th night. I'd just come back from a long walk around the old deer trails. scouting for mushrooms. The sun had dipped below the trees and cast the forest in burnt orange. I remember the birds going silent all at once, like someone had flipped a switch. Even the wind seemed to die. I felt something watching me. That's not just a phrase people use in stories. It's real, like your skin tightens and your stomach drops. I stopped walking and turned in a slow circle. Nothing, just trees, stillness. I hurried back to the cabin, locked the door, pulled the curtains. At around midnight, I was woken by the sound of scratching, not inside, but along the outer walls. First one side, then another, like claws being dragged, lightly, purposefully. I grabbed my flashlight and crept to the front window. The porch was empty, then something stepped into view, not from the woods, from beneath the porch. It stood tall, maybe 8 feet, muscular but wiry, covered in patchy dark fur. Its legs were bent backward, like a dog's. Its arms were long and twisted, ending in large hands tipped with claws. But it was the head that froze me. A wolf's head, but stretched too long, too thin. Its mouth hung open, revealing too many teeth, and its eyes, those damn eyes, were wrong. They weren't animal, they were aware. It tilted its head like it could see me through the curtains. I backed away slowly, heart hammering. I didn't breathe until the scratching stopped. By morning, there were claw marks gouged deep into the wood all around the cabin. I packed everything, stuffed it into my old pickup, and left without looking back. On the way into town, I stopped at a gas station. The old man behind the counter looked at the claw marks on my truck door and gave me a single nod. "You were up near Hollow Ridge, weren't you?" he asked. I hesitated, then nodded. "Damn Dogman," he muttered. "That thing's been stalking those woods longer than any of us have been alive." I asked him what it was. He just said, "It don't like being forgotten. That's why it waits for people like you, ones who come back." It was the summer after my divorce when my sister offered me her lake house in Wisconsin for a few weeks. "Go clear your head," she said. "No neighbors for miles, just trees, water, and peace." I needed that. I needed away from people, noise, expectations. The house sat on the edge of a wide, still lake, with a dense tree line wrapping all around it, like a dark curtain. It was beautiful in the way loneliness sometimes is. Every morning I fished from the dock, read old paperbacks, in the sun, and grilled whatever I could catch. It was quiet, but then it started. The sounds came first, deep growls from the tree line at night. Not coyote, not bear, lower, meaner. I told myself it was just forest noise amplified by my imagination and my state of mind, but something about those sounds, it felt like they were meant for me. 3 nights in, I woke to something thudding softly against the lake house walls. Just once, every few minutes. Subtle, measured. I walked to the front door with a flashlight, heart racing. I didn't open it, just pressed my ear against the wood. Something was breathing on the other side. Heavy, wet. It sniffed the crack beneath the door like a bloodhound. Then it dragged one claw down the frame, so slowly it made my bones ache. I stood frozen, light off, waiting for it to pass. By dawn, it was gone. I called my sister, voice shaking. She laughed nervously, told me there were legends, old ones, about some kind of wolf thing up there. "Locals call it the Dogman," she said. "Supposed to walk on 2 legs, big as a moose. Just stories." But the next night I saw it. I was sitting by the back window with all the lights off. I didn't want to be seen. That's when it stepped out of the trees near the lake. Tall, broad shoulders. Fur, black as oil. It walked on 2 legs with a hunch, like it had once been human, and forgot how to move like one. Its arms hung low, claws nearly scraping the ground. It walked to the dock, sniffed the air, turned slowly, and then it looked directly at me. I wasn't moving. I wasn't even breathing. But it saw me. I felt it. There was no mistaking that awareness, that intelligence. And then it grinned. The thing turned and disappeared back into the woods, quiet as fog. I packed at sunrise, left dishes in the sink, left the fish still strung on the dock, drove without stopping until I saw cities again, until I heard sirens and traffic and people yelling on sidewalks. Weeks later, I got a package in the mail. No return address. Inside was a single Polaroid photo. It was of the lake house, taken from the woods. Through the window, you could just barely make out me, sitting inside, staring out. I wasn't supposed to be up there alone. Company policy was clear. Never work the North Ridge without backup. But when you're 2 weeks behind on clearing old logging trails and your supervisor's breathing down your neck, you cut corners. I took the ATV up the slope around 7 a.m., figuring I'd be back by late afternoon. The sky was overcast, thick gray clouds rolling over the treetops like they were in a hurry. The woods were dense, deeper than I remembered. I grew up not far from these mountains and thought I knew them well. I was wrong. Everything felt off. No birds, no bugs, no wind. Just the hum of the ATV and the crunch of branches under my tires. I parked near the flagged section and started marking trees to be cut, but the silence made me pause. It was wrong. I know what a quiet forest sounds like. This wasn't it. Around noon, I heard footsteps. Not animals scurrying or a deer bounding through brush. These were slow, deliberate, heavy. I called out, thinking maybe someone had followed me up the trail. No answer. Then I smelled it. Rotten meat, wet dog, copper, like blood. My stomach turned. I backed away from the flagged tree and scanned the woods. That's when I saw it. Standing about 40 feet away was something huge. I don't know how I missed it at first. It blended into the shadows, tall as a refrigerator, built like a linebacker, covered in matted, dark fur. Its legs bent the wrong way. Its hands, not paws, gripped the bark of a pine tree, claws digging into the wood. Its eyes locked onto mine, yellow, not glowing, reflecting, focused, and then it smiled. Not a snile, a smile, like it was toying with me. I stumbled back, toward the ATV, but it moved fast. Too fast for something so big. It wasn't running, it was weaving, darting from tree to tree, toying with my sightline. I fired up the engine and tore down the slope, nearly flipped the damn thing on a route. The thing chased me for a while. I didn't see it, but I heard it, branches snapping, guttural grunts, and what sounded like panting, laughing, maybe. That was the worst part. I think it was laughing. I didn't go back for 2 days. When I finally did, with a full team and 2 rifles between us, my gear was still there. Spray paint, rope, even the snack wrappers. But there were marks on the flagged tree. Claw marks, deep, measured, and on the back of the ATV, carved into the seat leather, with something unnaturally sharp, were 4 words. You shouldn't be here.